Thanks everyone for coming. Unfortunately, Brian Porter, I'm not him. I know the program was a bit too late to change, so I'm filling in for Brian Porter. So unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it. So today I'm going to talk about a term that I don't say I'd invented, but kind of thought about over the last 9 months or so. So just a quick bit about myself. I'm focused mainly on application security, responsible for the technical lead on a security engineering team. Co-leader of OWASP Scotland, along with Rob, who's at the back there. Be a Farmers member, if you didn't see our talk this morning. I'm on Twitter, do quite a lot of tweeting, and I do security stuff. So, I don't know how many of you feel like this when you're trying to talk security to devs and that at times, but it can often lead to a frustrating time. They either don't follow your advice or ignore what appears to ignore you, not following practices, and so on and so forth. And too often carry on trying to do the same thing over and over and over. So over the last few months, I've tried to take a different stance, try to change direction and be a little bit more engaging with our development teams, QA teams, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of where this talk is going. Security enablement, this is kind of where I derived it from. So Spotify have a model that is a squad-based model. Our company took this on a couple of years ago, and the whole notion around squads is a self-contained unit that is responsible for developing, testing, and deploying the work that they do. So in essence, they become a self-contained team that are responsible solely for their system service that they maintain and develop on. If you want to read a bit more, there is a guide or a blog that Spotify produced that goes into more depth. And within the squad model, you get a concept of squads, which are the teams, tribes, which kind of go a little bit further, and then guilds, which cross many squads. And the idea is you get something my idea was to get a security-focused group and concept behind this. And the sole purpose of this is to try to get these squads to follow best security practices and get them more focused on security. So, kind of taking it a step back and seeing how different people view security. I tried to look these up online, and these were kind of the best things I could find. I know if I ask my mom, she thinks I'm some superhero, which I'm not. The society thinks we all wear hoodies or balaclavas or just typing away a computer like that. But what we really do is just work like anyone else. And going a step further, security engineers, as much as I'd like to think, we don't party all the time. In fact, as I get older, I don't party anymore. Yes, my partner thinks I sit back and sit on my seat all day looking at a computer screen. At times I do yell at the computer as well. And when we think about it, what do our team members think of? And it's usually shouting, scolding, as well as a roadblock. Oh no, not those security folk. When we get to delivering a new project or a product, we're often the last piece that needs to be engaged and approve the release, and we need to try to change this perception. So the purpose of this talk is trying to find ways and tools and methodologies that can help change this perception. So as I said, we're trying to change from the policers, the enforcers, the people who are preventing things moving forward, and change into something a bit more engaging, become the teacher, guiding, helping those who have less of a knowledge gain a better understanding of what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and overall try improve security. So while we're looking at that, we also need to understand that businesses are changing. So gone are the days where you had these big waterfall models. So I like the notion of a tanker with the containers, where you can think each container is the individual changes. Back in the day, you used to have Goliath releases, which contained many changes. And this was okay from a security point of view because you had one major change, so you could spend months trying to plan for it, get the resources, get your tools together, get the relevant pen tests done, scans, all of that, before the release finally went out. So it was a lot easier to check things, gatekeep things. Yes, there was a lot of things to check, but you knew uphand when that was happening, so you could plan for it. Fast forwarding today, we have a very fast and dynamic nature. Things are changing extremely quickly. There's changes coming in different sizes, ranging from a relatively big change, say a bus size, down to small sizes, even maybe a motorbike, might be a few bug fixes. And it's no longer possible to use the old ways that we had, where you plan a big release, do checks at the end of that. It's just not going to scale. So it's time of trying to change things, trying to enable teams to hopefully take some of that on. Now, before we go down the road of trying to get teams on board and implement tools, it's really important that you get your management involved and approval from management. Almost everything else that I speak about, you'll find it quite difficult to implement without the approval from your management. And that includes from the top down. Getting them involved, getting approval from them, will make sure you don't have things like, why was I never consulted on this? I don't agree with this. This allows you to debate with management and make sure that you both come up with the understanding that they understand what's been trying to be accomplished, as well as making sure what you're trying to accomplish lines up with business goals. So you end up being on the same page. So the first step and road to security enablement is awareness. So you can't fix something that you're not familiar with. This is something that I've seen quite often. We get many pupils or students coming out of university, especially in my time, where we're never taught anything around security. Things like cross-site scripting, SQL injection, those were completely foreign to us. So how can you expect development or your development team of developers to not implement cross-site scripting in their code or SQL injection if they don't know anything about it or exists? Creating some sort of awareness will help them understand that, hey, maybe this is an issue. Hey, I need to be aware of this when I'm generating a new web page or choosing a new tool framework. That way we can get them on the road towards better training. But it's just to spark that initial interest. And there's several tools that you can help. OWASP Top 10, really, really great tool. I'm sure most people in the room know what this is. I use it in some of the talks that I give for recently for a code training organization. Again, it's not going into the weeds and starting to provide, hey, this is how you do cross-site scripting or SQL injection. It's more along the lines of, hey, this is what these things are, they're a problem, and this is why they're a problem. Too often we see things like cross-site scripting showing an alert box, but not showing what the repercussions are. Why is a cross-site scripting important to prevent again? Cross-site scripting can essentially own the browser, show you some real examples. Again, that will help the engagement. It's no longer a boring alert box that pops up. Similarly, there's SANS top 25 aligned along the top 10, but just 15 more And then CWE is a really good tool as well. So common weakness enumeration. These are basically categories that vulnerabilities can fall into. Again, not going into the depths, but at least make people aware of them, so when they see these types of terminologies come up, they can relate to it somehow. Now, following on from training and aware, your awareness, you start going down into more in-depth things. So this is where your training starts becoming more focused. And the first thing I want to say is avoid the mandatory training. I've seen several occasions where we've had mandatory training and not even a week later we get asked a question that was in that mandatory training. It simply doesn't work. Trying to throw something at someone and expecting them to take it on board and take everything in is just not going to work while they're trying to do their job. And also remember that perception. We don't want to be seen as these people forcing and roadblocks and talking down essentially at people. We want to try to be engaging. Try to get them on the same level as us. So things that can help with that in terms of training, gamification. Let's start making things a bit more fun. Let's make things competitive. There are products out there that have leaderboards. You can set up different sort of challenges. These things get your security teams engaged with your ordinary developers and QA, as well at the same time getting the really important training to them and the understanding of what it means to have a cross-site scripting or SQL injection, and understand the concepts behind it, how they're actually used by attackers. Brown bags, again, something that you can do, especially if you have a security team. Just give talks such as this. Put on different topics. It doesn't have to be technical. It can be soft skills. It's just the main thing is you're starting to engage and sharing your knowledge. And then the last one, for me, is really important. Capture the flag is something I'm terrible at. But the one thing I learned when I did my first one last year is not how bad I am at it, but it gets you out of your comfort zone. I've been in my current role for a good number of years, and you become very accustomed to your role. You kind of focus in and not be aware of the different things going on. Having a CTF can broaden your scope, get you outside of your comfort zone. And by doing that, it's going to also allow you to get others involved. And again, kind of related to gamification. Getting them involved, building up team, getting coordination going. So there's two aspects to CTF. One, to help your team learn the current technologies out there, the new exploits, the new vulnerabilities. And then also from the less technically focused folk. Get them involved in some security stuff. Get them involved. Get them to act like a hacker, so to speak. It just makes things more exciting than mundane sitting in front of a PowerPoint presentation, clicking through, and then finally answering questions as many times as you can to get the right answer just to pass. So, again, coming back to the mandatory training, it's often a deadline. It's often something that's placed upon your employees that you have to do this by date X. Try change it to your training to be, do it whenever you're free. Do it when you have some free time. It allows them to do their day job without having the extra pressure. Make it easy to get. Too often we might have to, I've seen you have to go through this portal and then go to that portal. Just make it a few clicks of a button. Make it easy to understand. Sometimes things can get really complicated. Bring it down to their level. If they're developers, they might understand some development terminology better. Testers, some other different terminology. At your own pace. Again, kind of related to the self-help, where if they hit a problem, allow them to get it when they need to. And the other thing is relevant and focused. You're not going to want a web developer learning about buffer overflows. That's not going to help them. So make sure that your training is appropriate for the job specs that you're targeting. That's going to help them stay on track, understand what they need to know to do the job, as opposed to knowing a wide variety that's probably not going to help them. And keep it current. Often I've seen some training programs that have not been updated for years. In the development sphere, especially with technologies, things change at an alarming rate. I myself have fallen back behind some of the technologies used today. When I left university, J2E, which is the enterprise version of Java for the web app stuff, was the end thing. Now, that's considered legacy. You've got Node.js, JavaScript, all of these weird things. And with those come new attack vectors, new vulnerabilities, new things to look out for. So make sure your training is kept up to date. And the other thing is cost effective. Don't go throw money at it just because, hey, we checked the box. Make sure it's relevant, that the money that you're paying is going to get you the results that you need. Monitor your training. Make sure that it's been actually used. There's no point in spending money on your training if no one's going to use it. Reevaluate it. Ask. Get feedback. These are all really important things, because otherwise you're just going to be throwing money at something that's not going to help. And who knows, they might have some pointers that might help you along your way. So security champions is kind of like another squad type thing. It is, although not specific to squads, it is an actual real thing. So if you go look, OWASP do quite a bit of write-up on this. And it's something that I'm quite keen on implementing. So security champions are ideally volunteers. So they already have a vested interest in security. So they will be more engaging. And they'll also want to learn more. And this is obviously going to be very important. If you want to have someone there as an ambassador, so to speak, for your security. But at the same time, they're going to act as a middleman between your developers, QA, and your security team. So they'll have the understanding of what it is, what products they're working on, the troubles that they're facing in getting those products developed. And then at the same time, they're going to understand some of the security issues, some of the frustrations from the security teams. So they kind of act as that middleman, the buffer. And hopefully, they will start driving towards a security culture. So a security culture is ultimately the goal that you should be driving towards. By having a team that's focused on security, always kind of thinking of security on the back of their minds when they're developing things, is going to certainly help drive your security going forward. Some other things that security champions can help with is reduce the burden on the security team. My team is really small. By having additional hands where we don't even need to go to the business and say, look, we need to hire new people, you're going to get immediate, hopefully, approval from managers. It might not be as much as a couple of full-time security people, but it's certainly going to help reduce the burden, especially on some of the more trivial, mundane security things. Additionally, because they're closer to the source, especially around development and releases, they might be able to help identify things sooner than later. Many times I've seen things released and you find that out afterwards, and it's extremely frustrating. Not to mention, at times, risky. But they, again, being the middleman, or woman, they might be able to spot those things sooner or raise them up sooner. So some of the things you can use to get people on board with your security champion program. It looks good on CVs. I mean, security is not going away. It's something that's growing. It's a challenge that I don't see will be solved in any time soon. So it's a good thing to put on their CV. You can possibly attend some conferences. BSides, such as this one. Who knows? If your budget's great, you might even be able to coax them with Vegas. And then, related to the last point on the previous slide, catch things sooner than later. It's just going to help the company, help the development teams, help the security teams. Fixing things after the fact is always a lot more costly than fixing them sooner. So the sooner you can get the issues found, the better it's going to be, and the less costly. So the other thing you need in your arsenal is tools. And tools help with many things. So they come in different flavors, so to speak, or genres or groups. The first one being your static analysis tools. So think of these tools as your source code analysis tools. They scan the code looking for common vulnerabilities. So they'll see things like, hey, are there any hard-coded passwords? Are you using weak cipher suite for your encryption? Those kind of things. Dynamic analysis scanning tools, those are what I like to think as more automated pen tests. So they will actually probe the service running and detect common vulnerabilities. A web service running, or web app. Are there any cross-site scripting vulnerabilities? What's your TLS implementation like? The next one, dependency library monitoring. This is becoming a really hot topic. Gone are the days of developing from the ground up. Used to come up with a new product, and there were no notions of GitHub, or even Maven was in its infancy when I left university. Fast forward to today, it's no longer developing the ground up. You're just grabbing libraries all over the place. And the way I view development now is more about gluing the libraries together. I've gone through dependency hell a few times, where you run it through the tool, and there's a vulnerability. Great. I'll go change the version. No. It's a dependency of a dependency of a dependency. So knowing where the risks lie is really important. I mean, we've seen the likes of Equifax. They got stung by a dependency vulnerability that they just didn't decide to update. So having these tools will help you hopefully fix them, if not, be able to identify the different risks, and you can hopefully put things like firewalls or WAFs or something in place. And then the last one is asset and vulnerability scanning. This is a lot higher level, more around your deployment. So many times we've seen different organizations being completely unaware that, hey, I've had this thing wide open on the internet. I didn't even know about it. The big thing now is all the MongoDBs and the other sort of NoSQL databases. So many are wide open on the internet, no authentication, and people are not even aware about them. So having these sort of asset scans that are scanning your perimeter and finding what's open is really important, because you can't fix what you don't know. Similarly, vulnerability scanning, kind of related to your dependency scanning, making sure that your OS packages are kept up to date, that you don't have any open ports that you might not want open. Go look on Showdown. Go look for RDP. Loads and loads of Windows remote desktop sessions open. While you're choosing your tools, it's important that you spend time in trying to choose the right tool. I've gone down the road of just suddenly grabbing a tool because, hey, the price sounded amazing, and it turns out it was a complete waste. The failing was on us, not the teams that we were testing. Take your time. Make sure that you research the tool. See how others have used the tool. See how well it worked for them. Avoid things like marketing hype. False positives. Zero false positives is a really popular one with scanning tools. Great. How does it help me if it doesn't? It's great that it doesn't find any false positives, but does it actually find anything worth finding? If I have a hard-coded password, does it find that? It doesn't help. I'd rather go through 10 false positives and have a report on the issues that I have than report nothing. Similarly, get the right tool for the job. Don't go for it because it's flashy and claims to fix the world and that. Make sure that you use the tool for what it's intended. And as I said previously, research. And there's also a misconception around open source. I'm not saying open source is bad. It's great. I'm a firm believer of open source. But sometimes open source is not always free. Free in the sense of, yes, the software may be free, but you still have resources to maintain, keep it running, set it up, tune it. A good example is mod security. Great product, but you have to invest time in tuning it to your needs. Whereas you could get something like off-the-shelf WAF, where they already spent the time and money and effort. So be careful with that. And as I said previously, go ask around, see what others have done. Often when I'm looking at a tool, I'll go on Twitter and just ask and see what other people's feedback are. Try avoid getting stuck in the same situation that they are in. They might have hit some issues that you may hit or may not, and you can help someone else out. Automation is really key. As I mentioned in the beginning, business is changing. Things are being delivered faster and faster and faster. We can no longer spend time doing manual reviews for each release. That's just not going to scale. CI/CD, which is continuous integration, continuous delivery, is the notion of, hey, it passes these tests, deploys in production. There's no manual deployment anymore. So even if you wanted to do manual pen tests, you probably wouldn't even know it's in production. So embedding things within your deployment process and your development process will go a long way. And it's this whole notion of shift left. It's used quite often. There's even products that sell themselves on that. All that means is you're trying to get into the pipeline, your deployment pipeline, as early as possible. The other important bits in order to solve this is you need less effort. So the last thing your developers and QA want to do is spend a whole bunch of time and effort trying to do the right thing. If you make it as simple as possible, they've essentially got no excuse. One tool that I'm hopefully open sourcing soon literally is 2 lines of code to write a security test. Now, any developer or QA that says that's too much effort, I'd probably have a word with them. And it goes for the second point. Put all the security knowledge behind the tool itself. That way, again, they don't have to have all the experience and knowledge. A good example is TLS. It's really complicated, even for the seasoned professionals. What protocols should I support? What cipher suites should I support? Why should I support them? When should I support them? And you can quickly see how a developer will get really confused. Make the tool make all those decisions, and then just have the developer write the tests. That way they can get the feedback when they need to, they can engage you if they need to, or the security champion, and you got your security built in. So as I said, this is the biggest win for security in my opinion. Trying to get in as early as possible. I don't want to say force yourself in, but essentially that's what it is. Putting yourself in the beginning, kind of putting your foot in the door and making sure you stick there. And the benefit of that is, it doesn't matter how fast the business delivers, because you built into that process, it should form a part of that process. So if it speeds up, your test will just have to speed up, or already speed up along the way. Another thing that I came across a company last year was they did not really have a security issue or bug process. Gaining insight into your security issues is really important from a risk management point of view. Understanding what issues you face and how much of a risk they present to your organization. Security is not always about fixing everything. It's about managing risk. And your security issues, bugs, are perhaps the biggest part of this. So when you have you need to have a process for filing them, tracking them, and prioritizing them. So when you have things like pen tests, make sure those found issues filter into this process. Issues get tracked. There's Jira, there's Bugzilla, and I don't know what else there is. But have your bug management essentially track your security issues. In addition, by doing so, you're going to be able to help do some sort of reporting analysis on your security issues. Identify which systems are more prone than others, which teams may need some more help than others. Maybe teams struggling on one part or another part. So you can then come along and give them guidance, give them additional training. And the other important thing is, it's all very well saying, hey, we have these tools, we have these procedures, this new program, but unless you start measuring it, how do you know if you're getting any better? So it's really important to have something to measure that you can feed back to management. Because remember, all the way in the beginning, you have to get buy-in from management. They'll no doubt want to see some sort of reporting on how progress has been made. So security issues are a great way of showing that. The other thing is, look to others. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try to come up with your own unique thing when there's something already sitting there, or someone's already done it, and willingly giving out there free or even sometimes paid for. Security community is very helpful. That's the one thing I've learned since engaging on the likes of Twitter now. People are always willing to help out each other, give advice, give recommendations. Tooling is a good example. Like, hey, I recommend this tool because I find it useful in this, I didn't find that tool useful in that. And also, giving back sometimes helps as well, because you never know. Someone might be in the same position that you were in. And another way to look at it is see what different organizations are doing. So Netflix are a good example. They have a whole Git repository of all the tools that they've developed. So it gives you some indication of what they're doing. As I mentioned in the beginning, Spotify, they have a squad model. Facebook, yes, I know. That's, yeah, a few smirks. But they have some fantastic tools. In all honesty, OS Query, really great tool. Their CA transparency tool, again, great tool. And also importantly, you don't want to make the same mistakes. You can avoid some frustrations, perhaps even financial losses, by avoiding the same mistakes that some of the other organizations or groups or companies made. And some other advice that I'd like to give. So we're all human, and too often in security we kind of put ourselves on a pedestal and want to solve everything and be perfect in a sense. And I know I'm a perfectionist myself, and it sometimes drives me up the wall when I get told, no, you can't do this, or we have to allow this through. But sometimes you just have to accept that. There are going to be times where you're perhaps going to be breached. And as I mentioned on our talk earlier with the beer farmers, companies are more often remembered for how they handled the breach rather than the breach itself. And the other important thing is learn from that. So when you breached, hopefully you won't be, but if you are, take a step back. Form a plan, how you're going to respond to that breach. And in there include how you're going to learn from that breach. What further measures are you going to put in place? Think of it as a learning exercise. The other thing, again, really, really hard for me, because I have none, is patience. Remember, we're the professionals in security. Your development are professionals in development. Your QAs are professionals in testing. So it's easy to lose your patience and get angry and frustrated when they don't follow something that you've told them. Did you take the time to explain it to them? Did you take the time to explain the repercussions? So sometimes you just need to take a step back and just let them do the thing. Sometimes they might make a mistake, but that's when you step in and you help guide them and correct them. If you've got your security champions, get them to do it. They'll be a lot closer to that person. Other thing is asking for help and knowing when to. And this could be asking for help in terms of security things, because let's face it, we're not all oracles. We don't know everything. It's impossible for us to know everything. There's many things that I don't know, and I'm learning on a day-by-day basis. But asking others is the only way I'm going to get to learn that. Similarly, you have professionals that are well-versed in the topic that they are working on. So your developers may be, Java experts or Node.js experts. And the thing that I've found that's become really difficult is keeping track of all these technologies coming out. The really difficult thing on my job is I essentially have to be an expert in all technologies used. That's just not going to happen. So I have to engage with my teams to make sure I understand the different concepts and technologies being used. So in addition, I become the kind of student. And I've mentioned this before, Twitter. So Twitter is a really good way, and that forms part of engaging with the community. Already by attending this talk, you guys are engaging with the community. Get your devs to come to some of these talks. As I mentioned, security champions. But there's no reason why your development team or your QA team can't come. It just helps break down those barriers between the security team, the development team, the QA team. And you can bounce ideas off one another. Start sharing ideas. Start learning new things. I know some people I've spoken to, and we've bounced ideas off each other, and it's already started blossoming into new things online, providing resources for others, as well as relationships. At the end of the day, we're all humans, so we still need to interact with one another. Humans are built on relationships. It's all very well talking through a computer or a microphone, but nothing compares to a face-to-face. So there are quite a few slides there on the different tools and methodologies that you can do. So I just thought I'd try to sum it up in one slide as best possible. At the end of the day, the security teams, your development teams, your QA teams, regardless of actually, in fact, what team you're on, you're there to achieve the same goal. And that for your company or organization would be, I don't know, a service, a function, a product. But that's what you're there for. Doesn't matter your job role. The company or organization has to make money. And as cheesy as it sounds, you're all one team at the end of the day. So you should be working together to achieve that same goal. And hopefully by using some of these tools and methodologies, it can help do that. In addition, trying to leverage security and change the perception from being a roadblock to be something that can help engage, help teams out. I've had several examples or instances where I've implemented some security function, and it's actually helped improve user experience or help identify areas that needed better performance or better engagement. The really important thing as well is allowing teams to do the right thing with the least amount of effort. If you do this well, you'll probably nail it right on the head, because teams won't have an excuse. And often developers and QA want to do the right thing, but going back to how business is changing, it's deliver, 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 and deliver at any cost. So for them, the delivery is going to far outweigh the security that they would need to do. So if you make it really simple, it should help them embed security within, I don't know, a couple of minutes. Well, great. There's no excuse not to do it. And that kind of drives to the second point of creating a security culture. By creating this culture of, hey, let's do the right thing, and you get kind of frowned upon by your peers. And that's really important. Not by your security people, by your peers. Then you start getting better results. Because, hey, Fred, you didn't do that correctly. You might want to check that. While checking in a code review. Did you do checks for malicious characters? No, I didn't. Well, you better go off and do that. It's not me as a security professional or Joe and the security team hounding them. It's Jane on the development team. So it's breaking down those barriers, and hopefully that can help. So, are there any questions? Yes. Okay, so the question was, do you have any suggestions for metrics that you can report back to management on?
I think you can chat. Oh, just to repeat it. Yeah, do you have any suggestions for metrics? Ones that you've seen that have been successful, yourself in particular?
Yeah, so coming back to the security process, security issue reporting, that's why I was hesitant about putting that in. But I thought it's actually really important because it deals kind of with that. It might not be the sole metric you rely on, but it paints a really good picture. So if you start prioritizing, what we use is the CVSA scoring. For those who don't know, Common Vulnerability Subscoring System. It's basically a industry standard way of trying to rate a security vulnerability. It takes into account things such as, is this network exploitable? How hard is it to exploit? And what is the repercussions if someone exploits this? So your CI triangle. And then that comes out with a score. So we use that to then rate accordingly our bugs, right? Rating from that kind of critical all the way down. And then trying to take counts of those and see, hey, how many criticals have we had this month? Versus how many releases have we had this month? okay, great, the ratio is looking good, or it's getting worse, all right, or which teams did the new criticals come in? And you can start forming a better picture and understanding where your risks lie, which teams are perhaps underperforming, and where they may need additional help. Another area that you can use is pen tests. So pen tests are often mandatory, especially third-party pen tests for some companies, for compliance reasons. And you can, it's difficult though, but you can use previous pen test reports to try scale to see how well you're doing, especially if you're doing annual ones because you have a whole bunch of new releases, perhaps. But the reason why I say it's difficult, unless you get the same pen testers in that, you might get varying results, especially if you've got a really useful pen test company and a not so good one. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
As I guess when you started the talk, you talked about movement towards self-contained teams in the agile world. How do you ensure accountability for security within those self-contained teams, especially given a lot of, I guess, the bits that you're suggesting were quite voluntary or elective when it comes to sort of security champions, guidance, things like that?
Sure, great question. So within the squad model, and again, not all companies are adopting this. I think it is quite a new thing, so I don't know how the adoption rate's going to go. But within the squad model, teams are accountable for themselves. So you have the notion of a squad. Each squad has its own squad leader, and that squad leader filters up to a kind of broader manager that's responsible for several squads. So ultimately, a lot of the security issues would filter all the way up to that manager, and that manager would then be held accountable. Find that as soon as that manager has a bit of pressure applied to them, quickly they tell their squads, hey, I don't want to be seen in this bad light, so you better fix this. And having that again, coming back to the prior issue thing, having some sort of SLA around your certain priorities, the bug priorities, can help drive both the accountability as well as the measurement. I don't know, criticals need to be fixed in 6 weeks. Otherwise you have an exception process, and the exception doesn't look too good. So that again can help drive some of the accountability.
Hi. You seem to be against mandatory training and prefer gamification and other methods. But how do you scale that for very large global companies? And also, how do you track engagement? Because there's some people who will be naturally interested, and others you're going to have to drag them kicking and screaming to get them engaged. And if it's voluntary, that just may not happen.
Again, a good question. You're totally correct that trying to get everyone engaged is not going to happen. I mean, people have different interests, and the thing for me, and I'm sure many others in the room always find, like, hey, how can you not be interested in security? Well, it's much like how I'm not interested in performance engineering. There's just some people just simply not going to be interested. It kind of comes back to my point of security culture, but hopefully trying to create this culture of, hey, we need to focus on security because bad things happen, and when trying to put it another way is I hear people say, hey, security is not my job, so I don't need to worry about it. Well, when you get breached and you lose customers and you have redundancies, well, you may soon lose your job. So, yeah, it's perhaps very much your responsibility as a, say, cheesy line, security is everyone's responsibility. So hopefully by building that notion of security culture, where that kind of saying, if you slip up, you might lose your job kind of thing. Obviously, don't say it like that, but that hopefully will drive that security culture where either they think that way or their peers might nudge them and say, hey, because of you, I might lose my job, so buck up kind of thing. And again, changing away from those mandatory training, I've been through them. I've even had to do security ones. It's just click, 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 to a more gamification thing. It makes things more exciting, and especially the competitive nature. A lot of devs, QA, and that are very competitive, especially make a team-based one. That can hopefully drive it. Another thing, if you have budget, dangle some prizes, security champions of the week or month or whatever. Any other questions? Thank you, everyone.